Hey everyone, I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. Thanks for joining the show. Today I'm going to be discussing the Brooklyn Nets and their upcoming offseason. We have a little more clarity on the situation after the lottery results that just happened. Just a couple quick announcements, but so I've differentiated when I'm doing a podcast versus those cap-centric videos, which are coming up soon. You can see different playlists for each one. This is number 17 of 30. As you can see in the top, I have the sports business classroom logo. I'm going to be an instructor there. There are still spots available. Check the link in the description if you are interested in participating in that. There's a sign-up code as well. You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, at Yossi Goslin for all sorts of transaction cap analysis as moves happen. So now is pretty good time to follow me. This time of year, there's going to be a lot of transactions and stuff. And yeah, you can see all my stuff on YouTube, my newsletter, Third Apron on Substack, and capsheets.com for all salary cap information. So the Nets, among just about all the teams that were among, all the bottom tier teams that got the absolute worst results in the lottery on Monday, just probably the most chaotic lottery, maybe the most. I think 2019 was pretty chaotic, but I think this one just might take the cake. And joining me to discuss, you can find his work at the New York Post. He's an NBA reporter for them. He covers the Nets particularly well. Brian Lewis. So, Brian, there's a lot of opinions on how the Nets should approach this offseason. Should they pivot from a rebuild, or should they continue what they started last year? Does this result, do you think, might change any of that?
Does this result change their planning, or does this result change the fact that there are a lot of disparate opinions? Because I think the
I suppose their
disparate
own
opinions
approach.
are going to continue.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
yeah, I suppose their approach, what they actually are going to be doing.
Sure. Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, there's a difference between sitting at number one and knowing that you have Cooper Flag. Um, I mean, I think I certainly don't want to speak for every team. I don't even want to speak for the Nets, but I think the overwhelming majority of teams, they get Cooper Flag, they're holding that pick, come hell or high water. Um, Number two, that's a different story. And then everywhere else, well, I should say 2 through 4, because that strengthens your hand if you're trying to deal with Milwaukee, right? If you're trying to put together an attractive package to Milwaukee, 2 through 4 gives you a better chance. Now, everywhere else after that, 5, which was impossible for them, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's a different story. So I do think it changes. It changes your plans depending on where you land. And they landed, unfortunately for them, in one of the two most likely landing spots, which was always going to be 7 or 8. Being in the top 4 was never likely. This was the second most likely landing spot. 7 was the most likely landing spot. Either of those aren't overly attractive to Milwaukee, presumably. So that means you would have to throw even more in a deal. And frankly, seeing San Antonio land where they did and give them even more ammunition, that makes that more of an uphill climb. So if that means you're less likely to get your target A, which was never likely, it may mean you're going to be going into another year of tanking or strategic losing, whatever it is that you want to determine it as. So I do think the results on Monday are going to play an outsized role into what you'll see all through 25-26.
I agree. When a lot of the speculation kind of revisited, because we've heard in the past that the Nets are interested in pursuing Giannis, and when it circled again within the past few months, I was kind of confused because the way I see it, if they were to get a guy like him, they would need to have enough left to bring in another guy realistically, or else most likely it's not going to work out. He might not be totally interested in the situation. Doesn't really make sense otherwise. And they do have a very high volume of draft picks. We'll get into that. I already found it unlikely that even if they got the number 1 or 2 pick, that they would still pursue that direction. And now I would say, yeah, it's even less likely, and they're probably going to see through what they started last year. They officially started a rebuild once they traded Mikal Bridges, and in conjunction made that trade with the Rockets to get their own pick back, so they can have a lottery pick this year and at least the following year, because then the Rockets still have like a kind of still have the net swap in 2027. So it seems like now they're going to see through this 2-year plan that they started last year. They're already halfway done, probably one more year of bottoming out. And from there, see what they've got. And maybe they got a couple of good players that they can help make a push to being competitive. And then maybe they'll still have some cap flexibility to go after some guys who can supplement that. By sliding down to 8, I think it'll make them more active in the draft. Because obviously they were hoping they could move up to at least top 4 from the 6th spot, and instead they fell. And they were already looking like they're going to have to be pretty active in this draft because so they have 16 first-round picks over the next 7 drafts. 4 of them are in this upcoming one. And it's not like completely out of the question that they bring in 4 rookies. It's happened before. The Rockets did it 4 years ago. But it's mostly like the placement of these picks. You've got 1 lottery pick and 2 in the late 20s, 1 in the middle of the first round. So now that they fell to 8th, I think they'll be more motivated to try to move up now. Maybe they're not able to get it done by combining their current picks in this draft, but they do have some extras in future years. And I'm thinking that at this point, yeah, they got to try to get now they really got to just target who they want. And so that's what I'm looking at. And as I see things, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that they can maybe even go up to number 2. You mentioned how the Spurs now, it's going to be an uphill climb to top their offer for Giannis, but maybe the Nets could be a facilitator if the Bucks don't particularly want a lottery pick as the centerpiece of their trade. Maybe there's a way they can get veterans from another team because the Bucks, they kind of want to. I think they're going to want to stay good and relevant now. And then maybe there's a way for the Nets to capitalize on that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but yeah, I would expect them to be even more active in this draft to try to fulfill their goals.
I mean, I would agree. The few people that I know within Milwaukee are not talking to me right now. So I don't know what their plans are. I wish I did. I would agree with the overall premise that if they are forced into a situation where they have to move Giannis, they are not in possession of their pick, so it does not benefit them to tank, clearly. What I would say is, therefore, if you're giving them picks and you're getting Giannis, whoever it is, Nets or anybody else, the assumption is that you're going to be a good team and you're going to have lousy picks. So that's even less attractive to them. So you would need to either give them picks that belong to a third party, which the Nets do have a lot of, or get their picks back for them, which means dealing with New Orleans. I've also presumed that if and when Giannis gets traded, and I'd say the same thing about the KD trade, it's probably not a clean trade, right? So 3-team deal, 4-team deal, which, as we know, Sean Marks loves to do his large, fast, complicated 4 or 5-team deals. But yeah, I would, in a general sense, agree with your assessment. I expect Brooklyn to be active, whether that's, moving up in this draft, whether that's moving a pick into next year, because next year's draft is loaded and they only have 1 first rounder next year. But I mean, I think 8 of 9 years, Sean Marks has made a deal within 48 hours of the draft. So, what's the saying? History is the best guide to the future. So I'm assuming And I have assumed for quite some time that he will be active either on draft night or the day before or maybe the evening before that. That is what I assume.
You
Now, there are
mentioned, oh,
opportunities to move around. There are a lot of opportunities. I mean, there's only, what, I think there's 9 teams without a first rounder at all, 2 teams without any picks. So there are opportunities to move around. In their case, if there is a guy that they absolutely fall in love with, they're smitten with, I certainly wouldn't put it past them to package some of these assets or a player and an asset and move up. If there's somebody that they're absolutely in love with and they think that guy's going to go at 3 or 4 or what have you, I wouldn't put it past them to move up to get him. And now, because they've dropped to 8, they're in a position where they might have to do that.
yeah, you mentioned the Pelicans as a team that the Bucks might have to deal with because they have their pick, they have controlled their picks through 2027. Another team is the Blazers from the Damian Lillard trade. They've got control between 28 and 30. So it does expand what the actual, totality of the, how many teams might have to be involved if the Bucks are really trying to get control of their picks. But a lot of these teams that we've touched on, one of the main reasons it would have to be a bigger trade is because a lot of these teams are probably not going to want to take on money. Like if Portland's involved, they're already like very close to the tax. If they're gonna not want to like take on the extra money that the Spurs are gonna have to send out, or that the Bucks might want to send out. That's where the Nets come in. They've got the most cap space. There might be the only cap space team with a projected about 50 million to spend. So there will be an opportunity there. You mentioned also about the possibility of them either trading some of the picks they have this year, or even some of their players to get picks in other years. The distribution of their picks, it's a little out of whack right now, where they only have extra picks in the odd number years, and that's just like that's just mainly based on how the Kevin Durant and Mikal Bridges trades played out, where they got the most amount of picks they could possibly get from these teams, but that required them getting the odd number years. So this kind of segues to my next thing I want to talk about. Their veterans, Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson, I suppose. I mean, yeah, mostly those two. If they were definitely, they could have been acquired ahead of the last year's trade deadline, and it seems like they would have gone for more first round picks. As I mentioned, the Nets have the most first round picks, and I think over the next 7 drafts out of any other team. And I do think we're starting to get to a point where they can either try to redistribute them, or maybe try to really just focus on consolidating them for certain targets, young targets that they particularly like. That could be including moving up in the draft, or maybe just trying to spread them into the even number years. So now that we're closer to the draft and free agency, I'm curious now if when they do listen to offers on Cam Johnson and Claxton, are they willing to take another like big haul of quantity of picks just to add to the pile, or could they be focused more on trying to get maybe like some young players or specific picks that can be better quality? I wonder if they're going to start focusing on that with their whole draft pick distribution going on.
It's in terms of kind of upping the quality of their picks rather than the vast quantity of their picks. Yeah, that's certainly feasible. Also, if there are, yes, I would agree, if there are young targets that they like, um, those are guys that they could kind of hone in on and try to use some of those picks. I mean, next year's draft, now that's an even draft, only 1 pick, and it's supposed to be every bit as deep, maybe even better at the top, right, than this draft. Um, so I mean, now again, they have their own pick, which they spent heavily to get back. So this was always the plan, right? To bank this year, bank next year, have some money to spend based on 2 years worth of lottery picks and extra first rounders and then go heavy, which is kind of what Houston did. It's kind of following a similar blueprint to what the Rockets did. Um, but yes, if they could move picks either forward or backward to try to aim for a couple of young targets, that's also, I think, part of the grand idea. Can't guarantee who those targets are going to be, but I do think that's part of the, for lack of a better term, optionality that they have.
When we look at history, what the Nets have done in the past decade when they were trying to get out of the hole created from the Celtics trade, they really didn't have much to work with. They didn't have many picks. They had to really, like, Sean Marks really had to scrape to get some extra picks and then capitalize on those selections. I think about when they did the D'Angelo Russell trade. They got him by taking on Mozgov's money for next. I think he had 2 years left. Trading Thaddeus Young and then using that selection to get Karis LeVert, and like every one of those moves, they all like incrementally helped the Nets get to the spot that they were able to have like a nice level of depth before making their free agency signings in 2019. This is different where they're way better equipped, where they have a ton of cap flexibility. They have an abundance of draft picks. And now I think we're going to start to see, we'll start seeing them be a little more creative because they have more options. So one thing I'm keeping an eye on is, they can target certain draft picks, try to trade up in this draft and the next. I'm curious if they might start to target guys on rookie deals that might not have a secure future with their current team. So like just some guys that come to mind as an example, pretty obvious example, Mark Williams, traded to the Lakers, then not traded. That could be a guy where if the Hornets might really want to try to trade him, given how the awkwardness of the situation, but also they kind of showed their hand, like, oh, this is what we like. Was it what we want for him? That could be a guy maybe the Nets want to get for the right price. A couple guys that are going to be also free agents next year, like Jaden Ivey. I wonder how much the Pistons are going to be invested in him after this run without him. Jabari Smith is a guy that his future seems a little uncertain with the Rocks already paying a bunch of guys like Benedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, just a bunch of guys that teams might not be able to comfortably pay, and maybe the Nets want to bring them in if the price is right and try them out and see if they can be a part of the next great team. Because right now the roster, it's hard to really identify like who is the major upside piece on the team. Like I would say right now it's Noah Clowney has the most upside. And yeah, they got to, if they acquire these guys, they're not really going to boost the Nets record, like put them out of position to have a high lottery pick. They'll still get in that spot most likely. So that's one other thing I think I'd really keep an eye on is even if they could get just one guy like that and buy low on them. Those are the type of moves I think I'd really keep an eye on. In addition to them taking on a bunch of bad money and more draft picks, and then maybe going after some restricted free agents, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean there will be a couple of restricted free agents, but yeah, I don't expect them to be. I don't expect Sean Marks to be running around with offer sheets this summer the way he did, during his first rebuild, when general managers would be terrified when they see him coming with an offer sheet for their RFAs. I don't expect to see that.
So that's something that, I've touched on that in the past. In 2016, 2017, they would offer huge offer sheets to some restricted free agents. This was during the big cap boom. So that's when back then people, like everyone in the league, felt no contract could be a bad contract with the way the cap was rising. And he offered some big ones for Otto Porter, Tyler Johnson, and there's one more I'm missing.
I think he offered
Alan Crabb.
Yeah. And then he offered, I'm going to butcher it, Montejunas later. I think that may be 2 years later, but yeah. Yeah, he offered several. And frankly, got lucky. Just about all of them.
Yeah.
They all got matched, and when you look back at it, I'm sure he feels very fortunate that that most of them got matched.
Yes, but then also they ended up trading for Alan Crabb anyways a year later. So
They did.
so
They
maybe they
did.
really did
They
like
ended
those
up and they
guys.
ended up with Tyler Johnson too.
Oh, they I forgot about that. They
They
did
did.
end up with him later. Yeah.
They did. They did.
So there's a couple guys that there's like three in particular that I'm sure, even if there's no like substance to it, I'm sure we'll hear the Nets linked to some of these guys in some capacity, specifically Kuminga, Giddey, and I would say Quentin Grimes. Um, and Kaminga's a
I can't
guy,
get away from the Kaminga. I can't get away. It's
yeah.
everywhere.
But here's the thing, like it just kind of makes sense where the Warriors, there's a number that if the Nets give him a certain level of offer sheet, the Warriors will probably have to not sign it and they could just get him because they already
Sure.
have such a big payroll with Steph and Jimmy and Draymond. And obviously, they're not going to prioritize Kaminga like after a certain number, if at all. So he could be a sign and trade guy. I think they'll try to sign and trade him, but that's an opportunity where they can kind of repeat what they did in the past decade, where if they hit a certain annual salary, I think they could just have him. What I'm curious though is maybe there's a way the Nets could leverage that where let's say they talk to the I don't know, let's say it's the Sixers in regards to Quentin Grimes, because the Sixers, they're going to want to resign him, but they're also very high into the tax, especially after their pick moved up. They've got some work to do to figure out how they're going to balance this payroll. And that's before bringing back Grimes and potentially Yabusele. Maybe instead of offering Grimes a very, like an above mid-level type offer that maybe the Sixers wouldn't want to match, they can negotiate a trade with each other. Maybe the Sixers can. Maybe there's a way the Nets could move up. They make a deal, and then the Nets just like, okay, leave Quentin Grimes alone. The Sixers just go ahead and resign him. So now I guess I'm playing like 45D chess, and where okay, don't sign these offer sheets. They're kind of a waste of time anyways if they're going to get matched. But maybe they could use it to their advantage. The threat of offering a very big one that makes the teams uncomfortable where they can make some type of deal anyways.
I mean, it's not impossible. You can sometimes the threat is enough. And everybody knows how much money the Nets have to spend. Now, who they really want to spend it on, of course, they'll keep close to the vest, but that's not impossible. And all of those teams. Now, I'm discounting Memphis and Santi Aldama, right? I'm taking him out of the mix, right? But I'm saying Golden State's cap situation, the Sixers cap situation, all of those teams are in situations where they are not rolling in cap space, right? So where the threat does actually have some teeth. So that could be done.
Yep. And they're the only one with cap space right now. Like the Pistons
Right. I
might.
guess Detroit could
Yeah.
theoretically.
And I doubt they will. I think most likely they just stay over the cap, re-sign some of their guys, position themselves for a trade later. And then the
In
Grizzlies, that's
Utah, I think, right, with Collins, maybe.
the
Yeah.
only other one is Memphis, but that's just if Jaren Jackson doesn't make All NBA and he's not Supermax eligible. So now they hedged and they could renegotiate his contract, take care of him another way. So it wouldn't be to pursue anyone. So it's really
Right.
just Brooklyn. I don't know. Maybe, and look, we could see some teams last minute sneak in. Like 3 years ago, the Knicks weren't going to be a cap space team, and then they dumped a bunch of money in the last week so they can free up the space to get Jalen Brunson. I can't think of who that might be, or if there's even any teams that are in that ballpark. I think it's pretty safe to say it's just Brooklyn, which, if there's only one cap space team, probably not a great year to be a free agent.
No, it's a
Yeah.
terrible year to be a free agent. It's
Yeah.
a bad year to be a free agent. And the Nets have a bunch of free agents.
Yeah.
And they have several restricted guys who, they're sitting there with Cam Thomas, who I'm certain wants to get paid, and they're sitting there with Day'Ron Sharpe, Ziaire, you know, and are they bidding against themselves?
So yeah, that's the last thing I want to get into. They're just, I think when talking about the Nets, it's hard to get into specifics because of the vast possibilities of what they can end up doing. Best we could really do is just kind of hone in on what direction they can do. But as far as their own free agents, so yeah, I'm looking at their cap sheet. I have them projected at around something like 50 million, maybe a little bit less, while being able to keep Cam Thomas's $12 million cap hold. So the idea is that the Nets can spend that much cap space and then they can re-sign Cam Thomas afterward to whatever he'll need. I would guess that most likely.
Well, I guess they picked up what, almost 2 million by their pick falling. So there's that.
Yes, that's another element. They got a little bit more cap space.
There's that.
That's a silver lining for the Nets falling in the lottery. They get a little bit more cap space, 2 million. I don't know, I don't know how that's. We'll see if that ends up mattering. They could also save some more, if they move up in the draft. If they got to trade multiple picks, it's another way they could save some more money by getting rid of some of the volume. I think Cam Thomas they'll probably bring him back at something pretty fair. Maybe you look at like what Colin Sexton got recently, maybe what that percentage of the cap is. Whatever adjusted for inflation, I could see him returning on something like that. At the same time, I'm sure he's not like 100% untouchable. If a team offers something nice in a sign and trade, I'm sure they'll consider it. But most likely, I think they'd bring him back on something that would increase his value in the future. But the cap figures does not account for bringing back Day'Ron Sharpe and Ziaire Williams. So I know that Day'Ron really turned it up at the end of the season. And Ziaire, established that he's definitely like somewhat of a rotation player now after not working out in Memphis. I mean, how would you think the Nets might be prioritizing bringing them back? Because I think
they're prioritizing Day. I mean, I think I would be surprised if Day'Ron weren't. Right? I think Day'Ron. He worked on his body first, right? That was the first thing, and then now his defensive positioning has gotten better. I mean, the rebounding has always been good. That's never been in question. But yeah, I would be surprised if Day'Ron weren't around and playing a fairly significant role.
So the
Ziaire, that's different. I mean, his qualifying offer is high, so I'm not sure I would expect to necessarily see him get that. But he seemed to be happy here. He made some strides in his shooting, which was always a glaring Achilles heel. I think they were happy with his defense. So without giving him a qualifying offer, I'm quite certain that something should be able to be worked out below that, or he'd be happy to be back and they'd be happy to have him around.
Yes. With Ziaire, he's got an $8.3 million qualifying offer. I wouldn't expect them to tender that to him. They would then make him unrestricted.
There's a lot of gray area, though, in between minimum and that qualifying offer.
Yeah. So I would just imagine it's going to be somewhere less than that qualifying offer. I'd be surprised if his market was something above that right now. With Day'Ron, so he's got a $12 million cap hold, so they can hold on to him, keep that cap hold, but then you're deducting another $12 million. But he's also, I don't really envision his market also getting that high. So they might be able to conceivably renounce his cap hold, which would technically make him unrestricted. But then keep in mind, they also have the room mid-level exception. So if they renounce him, okay, now you don't have his bird rights to give him up to whatever, you got to give him. But I could see his market on like the higher end being that 8 million room mid-level area. So you could still you still have an avenue to bring him back while maximizing that $50 million in cap space. So while yeah, I definitely agree with you with Ziaire Williams. I'm sure they'll not give him the qualifying offer and renounce him, so they could create the cap space necessary to actually have this cap space. I think they might do the same thing with Day'Ron Sharpe, but with the understanding that they still have they still have an avenue to bring him back. That's something that probably makes sense for both sides with that room mid level.
I have to be honest, it hadn't occurred to me that they might go that route, only because but there are so few threats out there.
Yeah.
So certainly, I mean, you're
Now,
still ending up in the same.
yeah. Now the alternative, actually, I didn't even think about this. It actually makes more sense. What you could do is just re-sign him to something less than his cap hold. So you keep his cap hold, you resign him. Let's say it's, I don't know, somewhere between 6 to 8 million, kind of like what Precious Achiuwa got last year. Okay, so you don't risk him leaving, and you got him at below that whatever his cap hold is. So you save a little bit already. But if they wanted to maximize it, they could do that renounce and then re-sign with the room mid level, because unless they really want to keep it, because now it could be used as a trade exception. I'm not sure, how much use they'll need of it. Like, I don't really envision them going after a particular free agent with that $8 million-ish dollars. So could be just useful for bringing back Day'Ron to help maximize their cap space. So just a lot of optionality there. That was pretty hyper specific, but just a couple avenues about how they could go back, bringing back some of their restricted guys.
Yeah, I mean, I would have assumed. I think the latter might be more likely, but there are different ways they can go about doing it, and in terms of ending in the same place, yeah, I think it's capital of what, 12.
Yeah.
So you figure, I figured somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10.
Yeah,
Somewhere in that vicinity.
As long as they get him at like slightly below it, then as far as like their cap situation is confirmed, it's like a net positive for them.
Right. Exactly.
But no, I think that's about it. Like, pretty just broad strokes on what the Nets are going to probably be focusing on now that we know the lottery results. And yeah, it's just the biggest thing. Can they move up? I think they have the means to move up. I guess it just kind of falls down to how much are they willing to put together to make that happen. Will there even be that much interest in a lot of these 2025 picks? They have 19, 26, 27 overall for a potential move up into maybe the top 4 or 5, especially as a facilitator for a bigger trade elsewhere. We'll see. But thanks for joining me, Brian. I really appreciate your time. Do you have anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I'm gonna eventually. I did a piece that was in our Sports Plus that ran today. It's behind our paywall. That was basically taking a look at the lottery while it was still raw, and I understand that it is still raw amongst a number of Net fans. But then I'll be going back and taking a dive a little bit deeper scouting wise on some of the players that could be available at their various hotspots throughout the draft. I only touched on that in that piece. But now that you have an absolute certainty where they're going to be drafting, it's more important now to look at some of the guys that might be available to them, whether that's Fears or whether that's Malawach, who, frankly, I would be stunned if he actually gets that far, the way he's shot and measured out so far at the combine. But I'll be looking more into some of those things.
All right, everyone. So be on the lookout for that. You can follow Brian on New York Post Lewis on Twitter and see all his work on the New York Post. You can follow me on Yossi Goslin. Also, same thing for YouTube, Spotify, Apple, where you can see all my old content. Subscribe to Third Apron. At some point, I'll do an even deeper dive into the Nets cap space, and I'll probably do a video on just some things they can do once we get a little more intel on like what the possibilities might be. And yeah, just be on the lookout for any changes on capsheets.com. And that's about everything. I'll probably be back sometimes this week for another team preview.